Hello everyone, welcome to Latera TV. I'm Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, and I'm joined by Razvan Cretu, who is Director of IT at international law firm CMS. Hi Razvan.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm all right. Coping.
Yeah, that's the word, isn't it?
As everybody does nowadays.
As we may or may not have just been saying. Thank you so much for joining us. So we've got some really interesting topics, quite a range actually. So we're going to run through some interesting just catch-ups on how you've been adjusting to lockdown, which is, we're sort of like, it seems ancient history, but obviously it's been, there's been so much that's happened. It'd be really interesting to find out how you've adjusted to that and remote working. And then we're going to go on to talk about the work you're doing with Microsoft Teams, which is hugely interesting to me. I'm sure most people listening, if not everybody, because you're actually pretty advanced with that. And then we're also going to talk about Project Cortex. And then if there's time, we're going to talk about some stuff that you're doing with the Microsoft Managed Desktop. But so can I just, to introduce you properly first though, so tell me a bit more. I mean, everyone knows CMS, but everyone probably knows you. But just tell me a bit more about the size of the firm and the size of the team.
Sure. The firm has approximately 4,000 employees altogether. We're spread around 23 offices altogether, mostly within Europe and Asia. We do have some offices in South America as well. So I think the only region that we are actually missing is North America. We're just working with partners there. Just CMS Cameron McCann Bar Olswang, so the CMNO side of CMS, we're about 4,000 people. And in terms of IT resources, we're about 100 people altogether in IT.
Wow, okay. So tell me about, I mean, tell me how the last few months been. How have you adjusted to remote working? Have you had to just sort of, have you just had to execute on the DR? Has it been relatively straightforward? Have you had to introduce new technology or new processes?
Well, from our perspective, so having something like a quarter of the worldwide population working remotely, it was a normal Friday, so it wasn't something out of the ordinary. The systems were built to accommodate remote working. It was literally just a matter of sizing. In terms of technologies, we did play with an alternative VPN initially, which that didn't work out very well. So we switched back to what we were using. We just sized that up. So more bandwidth. We changed the size of the remote appliances because obviously we didn't have 1,000 users connecting remotely. We had about 4,000, so about 4 times. So we needed bigger appliances. So we changed the appliances. We increased the number of licenses, but that was kind of it. In terms of people who were not equipped with Surfaces, we had a big stock of DR equipment. So in case something happens to the devices, we did have an old stock of Surfaces, so Surfaces that we replaced previously, which were reset to factory settings. So they had literally nothing on them. They were out of the box, just Windows. And people were issued with those to connect over Citrix. It was present within our environment anyway.
Okay.
So it was literally just a matter of coping with the bandwidth. That was the biggest issue.
Have you had to? So one of the interesting things from the survey that we did about the lockdown was the desktop setup in terms of the physical, the desks and the 2 screens at home. And that seemed to be the interesting thing. Is that something that's become a focus in terms of the way that people are set up? Because having gone myself and going, why have I got 2 screens? Which I'm sure you've heard. I physically can't function. Is that something that's become a focus, or was that already in place for a lot of people?
Well, no. So people, when they were working from home, they were mostly using their Surfaces, and that was it. Okay. So what we did initially, we offered, I think about 700 monitors that we had in stock. Yeah. So we told people, if you want the monitors, we can ship them to you. When we ran out of that stock, people could buy from Amazon and so on, and the firm would just reimburse them. So we just allowed people to set up their own office at home the way they thought it was best appropriate for them.
But it's great that you had the surfaces, isn't it? So you were, unlike a lot of firms who suddenly had to get hardware, trying to get it overnight. You were pretty sorted, weren't you?
Yes, but we were very lucky because we didn't have to purchase any type of compute kit, let's say. So no computers, because as I said, the people who didn't have surfaces, so they had desktops, for example, in the office and so on, that was mostly support stuff. They were issued with the Surface Pro 3s that we decommissioned and we repurposed, and we were keeping them as a DR stock.
So tell me about, so one of the things that I know that you've been using that's helpful, and I know that there's a lot of going on in terms of moving that forward as Teams, right? So I want to describe Microsoft Teams as the project which was not top of anybody's list, and then after lockdown it became top of everybody's list. But you actually have been using Teams for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, we deployed it to everyone in island mode about a year ago now. So it was deployed to everyone in, I think it was October, November 2019. So when we had the lockdown, when everybody just went into lockdown in UK and across the globe eventually, we didn't have to deploy any type of software. Everything was there. People were already kind of used to working in Teams. We had entire departments that were using Teams to its full potential already, so for collaboration and all that. We just told people, well, you have the tools at your disposal, use them. We didn't advance much in terms of the project. The project was supposed to be finished sometime this summer. It was actually delayed from the original scheduling because we discovered a bug within the Microsoft stack, and we waited for Microsoft to resolve that, and they finally did it I think it was last week, and we're now testing that. Hopefully next weekend we're going to have the first pilot office completely migrated from Skype for Business to Teams. And then we're gonna leave that for about a week and then roll it out across the firm. But when I'm talking about deploying Teams, I'm talking about everything.
So you're talking about telephony. People are going to be using it for the whole telephony. So that's the new thing, effectively. For everything. And that's what's happening next month. Is it?
Yes, it's just the telephony side. But in terms of collaboration, external collaboration. People being able to create teams, chat. We are openly federated, so we talk to clients on Teams and so on. It was all set up, tail end of last year. So
and so people. I mean, it's really interesting, and you've been using it for a while now. Because one thing I find really interesting when I have lots of conversations about Teams with firms, and a lot of people are quite early on in their roadmap in terms of they're really keen to use it, but a lot of them are just using it for telephony, and they're not really using the full suite. They're not really using it almost for what it was meant. They're not really using the collaboration. And if they are using collaboration, they're only doing it internally. But you're doing the full gamut, aren't you? So you've got internal and external collaboration. You're using it for
Yes. So we can share documents with external clients as well. We actually have a few clients who insist on using Microsoft Teams, and we accommodate that very well.
Okay. And is that, I mean, how have you got over this? So a lot of the firms that I speak to seem to have a lot of issues, in terms of there's a lot of concerns around information governance, and so their risk team, the clients presumably also want to use that, and I don't really know how they overcome that conversation, but risk seem to be, very much saying no right now. I think it would be really helpful. How are you overcoming perhaps some of the issues that have put a block on other firms using it?
Well, first of all, we didn't have these kind of conversations this time with the risk team, because we had this conversation all the way back in 2014, when we actually moved to Skype for Business as our full communication suite. And you could share documents in Sky for Business. You could do screen sharing and whiteboards and so on and so forth. It's just a matter of migrating all of that to Teams. Yes, in Teams is a little bit more persistent because you can do co-editing of a document and that document remains there. It's stored in the backend on SharePoint, but obviously we do have a cleanup mechanisms right now to make sure that data that is not being used is actually removed from SharePoint, and then teams that are not being used are actually shut down. Also, but it's kind of a manual process where we're working on deploying robots for completely automating the entire process. But from a collaboration perspective, so from a governance perspective, we do have encryption at the Office 365 environment using our own key. So we do control how that data is being accessed. That's one. And second, the lawyers do know that from their perspective, they do need to get all of those documents back into the DMS, which is the primary repository for data. So that becomes basically not dissimilar to what HiQ is offering, for example. It's kind of the same type of concept. We have a collaboration medium. We do the collaboration there, but the primary repository for data remains, and it's still iManage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're right. So just to be clear, so in terms of the provisioning, because that's one of the things I think that gets people worried. You know, is our documents going to stay in Teams? Will they end up in the right place? And obviously, will they be deleted? So it's quite largely manual. And do you mind me asking, are the lawyers doing it? Because I think I used to be a lawyer. So I mean, obviously, clearly you're looking at other automated approaches. But so for currently, given that it's manual, are they sort of moving everything out, and is it working in that way?
It is, but you have to understand something. So the way we deployed Teams, and again, we deployed it quite a long time ago. We deployed it as a collaboration tool. It's not supposed to replace the document management system, at least not yet. And it is just a collaboration medium, nothing more. So it's not matter-centric. It's not designed to be matter-centric. Not all the matches that we have will end up in Teams sites because there's no reason to do that. In some cases they do, in other cases they don't. But we have a lot more on the side of collaboration with clients. We have a lot of internal collaboration happening in Teams as well. So it is used as it is intended to be used, as an open platform where people can set up their teams for their needs, not necessarily us prescribing exactly how the team is supposed to look like, and then being responsible for getting that data out of there and putting it someplace else and so on. So that's a lawyer's responsibility. It's part of their normal duties. We do back it up because, well, you either need to do that. But apart from that, and cleaning up from time to time, it's not something that we have a lot of regulations around that.
Okay, and just lastly, before we move on to Cortex, so I guess there's been lots of conversations about the cloud and clients' approach to the cloud, but I guess this is no different to any other cloud system, and presumably COVID has meant that you know, did you get much pushback from clients, if any?
Not really. Obviously, a lot of clients are concerned about the security, and they're all asking how we're securing the data. Most of the clients are happy when we tell them that we are actually encrypting the data in Office 365 using our own keys. So that in most cases that's sufficient. That's sufficient. Okay,
all right. And then so Project Cortex. So can you give us? I mean, this is still well, I suppose not that new, is it? But can you just give an outline for anybody listening who doesn't know what Project Cortex is?
Yeah, so Project Cortex is basically Microsoft's way of trying to utilize their AI for real world products. So Microsoft had the AI stack released again, quite a while back, a few good years back. And it's been used in several niche cases, but it didn't actually reach mainstream. A lot of people are not utilizing the, um, the, the huge capabilities that Microsoft has within their environment. So Microsoft raised Project Cortex as a way of actually creating products that take advantage of that underlying AI technology. So the first one is the first released product is the SharePoint
Syntax.
syntax. Yes.
Yeah. And so tell me where you're at, and you're in discussions with Microsoft about Cortex and Syntax.
Yes, we approached Microsoft when Project Cortex just started, and we had an initial discussion with them, and then we had a subsequent discussion now when Syntax is released as well. So what we are planning on doing, we're planning on moving our intranet from SharePoint on-premise, which is where it sits at the moment, to SharePoint Online. It's not going to be an actual migration. It's going to be a complete refresh of the entire intranet. But parts of that we do want to utilize because we're going to store a lot of data on that SharePoint. We want to utilize some of the AI capabilities, the discovery capabilities. So it's basically what Microsoft started to do with the whole thing is it starts to look a little bit like Raven, to be honest, because it looks inside the document, it extracts data, it categorizes the data. So you start to see a lot of the functionality that people have been seeing in Raven for quite some time. You're starting to see that in the Microsoft world. So our discussion with them is around actually moving everything into the cloud and then categorizing all of that, tagging the documents. So we're talking about the knowledge bases at the moment. The other interesting thing is the connection between Cortex and Microsoft Graph. Because basically you have the Microsoft Search, which is really linked to Microsoft Graph, and you can have a lot of algorithms, a lot of automation just running on top of that graph, and you have all sorts of connectors that you can set up to be able to bring data in, including from iManage. There was a company, BA Insight, that are developing connectors for Microsoft Graph. So you can pull all of that data into Graph, and then you can analyze it and actually having it available for search. It may be the answer to that holy grail that most of the firms are looking for, of the universal search.
Yeah. I think so. I was going to ask you about a bit more on the automatic tagging, but so when I wrote about Cortex, so Neil Cameron, most people will know, said it threatens to add AI-driven analysis and understanding to all your Office 365 document type content. They call this knowledge, and it's for free. If it truly does this, then depending on performance and delivery, it may then challenge all vendors currently charging for this functionality to add yet more value. It may also fuel a whole new population of KM startups. Furthermore, existing vendors will also have to decide the extent to which they want to build on, coexist, or compete with this new technology. And then Neil Cameron being Neil Cameron, he says, as Joe used to say to dear old Pip, what locks? It's interesting, isn't it?
It's like going back in time when Power BI was first announced. So it's exactly the same thing. So when Power BI came along, everybody questioned how vendors that are selling BI will actually survive in a Power BI world. They still survive, but obviously all the mainstream type of graphs and reports are now kind of moved over a little bit towards Power BI. It's kind of the same thing. It's Microsoft going after a specific market with possibly low prices or integration with their own products and just smashing everything.
So tell me, can you explain a little bit more? I want to come back to that point about Microsoft and just get your thoughts on what we're going to see from them. But could you explain a bit more? So I feel like Project Cortex, they talk about automatic tagging, because obviously, as we know, one of the key problems in terms of being able to extract sort of the value that you get from your data is that we're generally terrible at actually sort of tagging it, but it does that automatically. So can you explain to me how it does it? Or a bit more, just a little bit more about it.
Well, again, this is all within the Microsoft realm. So they use kind of the same machine learning technologies and discovery methods that you would use within Raven as well. So if you think that you're going to have a data set and you're going to run syntax on the data sets, and that one will just generate the data for you, that's not the way it works. You do need to train the AI model first. Explain to the AI, well, this is how this type of contract works. This is how this type of, not necessarily contract, but even a part of a contract, this is how a specific clause would look like, and so on and so forth. And then they will be able to identify those type of clauses, those type of contract in a large data set and tag them based on the details that you've provided. So it's not an all-knowing machine. They try to sell it like that, but
they do. This is
correct. Sorry. But it is an engine that needs to be trained. So what Microsoft is providing, it's not the GPAI type of environment that will literally just understand your contracts because it reads them. No, it's not like that. We're not there yet. So. But
it's relatively easy to train.
It is, yes. So generating the models should be relatively easy, yes.
Okay.
And then utilizing those models to actually analyze the subsets of data should be quite easy as well.
Yeah, and actually I saw a really interesting discussion from Ignite, Microsoft's conference, talking about one of their test cases was an engineering company. And they were talking about, and I guess this comes back to the graph, perhaps that you were talking about the really sort of being able to connect people across the company in terms of what everybody's working on. So obviously that's still a challenge in terms of, and it will really help in order to make people, to really start to drill down into sort of being able to cross-sell and that kind of thing, potentially.
Well, almost all the Microsoft reporting, including Teams, also Office 365 reporting, all of that goes into Graph right now. So the Graph is quite important from a Microsoft perspective. Therefore, the integration between all the products that will come out of Project Cortex and Graph are key. And at the other end, the search integration with Cortex as well. Yeah. Because Microsoft Search is embedded with that one as well.
So tell me about, what are your thoughts on, so you're obviously doing a lot, Teams and kind of Cortex. Do you think Microsoft, so we've gone in phases with Microsoft in terms of their interest in legal. Do you think we're in for another phase of Microsoft making a play for legal, effectively?
It might be. I mean, I've seen a lot of movement in terms of reorganization within Microsoft and trying to reestablish legal as a vertical. I remember there were some attempts made by Microsoft to actually look into becoming the standard DMS for legal, which didn't work very well. But I think it may be it may be the time for Microsoft to actually start to come back. I mean, if you look at what you can do with SharePoint, that's quite a lot. It is significantly over what you can do with out-of-the-box iManage. But there's still certain bits and pieces that are missing, quite important bits and pieces that are missing from the Microsoft world. But it shouldn't be that difficult for Microsoft to just say, well, actually, I'm going to build those into the product. But if this is going to be like an add-on on top of SharePoint, which is exactly what they were trying to do the last time, it will probably fail as it failed last time. But if Microsoft is going to start to implement a lot more of this functionality straight into SharePoint, so making all of that mainstream for everyone, not just for legal, then I think a lot of people, including us, will consider it.
Yeah, okay. What would you say, what's the key missing bits for anyone from Microsoft listening?
Well, I think the organizational part, you do have things like versioning, but is not really where I manage or NetDocs is. And also you have the auditing trails, where again, you have some of the auditing trails, but not to the same level. It's not the same. So auditing, I would say, if auditing automatically provision folders, so workspaces in our case, and probably even on the security side, so a bit more granularity on the security than you can have at the moment. I think that could be there, but so it's not a lot. They're small bits and pieces, but you know.
Yeah,
they matter.
it's interesting, isn't it? And then they actually have to create. Well, they don't really have a legal vertical, and it's difficult with some of the almost service levels. That's the other issue, isn't it? You know, and actually that brings us on to whilst we've still got a few minutes. So you've been looking at the Microsoft Managed Desktop, but you started talking to them, but you sort of hit a bit of a roadblock with that, haven't you? So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so we started to work with them. I think it was beginning of last year, and we managed to do deployments. We repackaged many of our applications. They're now available in Intune, but we had some issues with the authentication because we had to move some of the services from on-premise to the cloud. So that was a bit of a stopper because of the COVID situation. We had some physical tokens that needed to be sent across the world, so that was stopped a little bit, and eventually they got where they need to go, but it's difficult to actually give them to the people. Plus, it's not something that you really want to mess with, an authentication system, when most of your organization is remote. So if that doesn't work, then they won't be able to log in. So we are still working on the best plan and the best approach to actually go in that direction. In the meantime, what we've done, and again, this is on the back of COVID, we started to utilize Intune more for ourselves on our own endpoint environment. So we're now pushing updates, and we're pushing applications via Intune. And eventually, because we were doing all of this anyway to manage devices that were not necessarily on our network, on our VPN, and so on, we said, well, actually, we could do an autopilot type of device, and we can do a complete build that works outside of the network, pretty much the same that Microsoft is doing. So we did that as well. But the other thing that stopped us initially was the service desk levels, because Microsoft came in with a 15 minutes response time to a query, and we had an average of 7 seconds and an SLA of 20. So that didn't actually sit very well with us, because going to the business and saying, well, actually, you're getting 7 seconds now. Can you wait for like 15 minutes? That wouldn't go very well.
They're in the middle of a really big deal, and it's 4 a.m.
Yeah, exactly.
15 minutes feels like 5 hours.
Correct. And also there were some issues with the resolution time, because obviously being Microsoft, they couldn't give you, well, this is how long it's going to take to resolve whatever problem you have.
Yeah.
And then hand over from their service desk to our service desk in case that was an issue with our applications and not one of the Microsoft ones. So we went from the first point, we said we're not going to be using the Microsoft Service Desk, which is actually included within the MMD licensing.
Okay.
But at this point, we do want to continue to explore both solutions, and at some point we will decide to go one way or the other. But now we have our own build, which is similar to the Microsoft one. We have our own policies. We're migrating group policies to Intune and so on.
Does your own book? Because the whole purpose of the Microsoft Managed Desktop is that it saves you time, doesn't it? It takes it off your hands in terms of all of the upgrades and maintenance and you know, the kit and all that. Does your own solution, does that have the same effect though, or you're in effect still doing a lot of the legwork?
Yes.
It does.
Yes, because yes, it does have exactly the same effect, because our own application we would have to update anyway ourselves. and everything that is related to Microsoft, when we move into that world, we kind of give Microsoft control of it anyway, even if it is controlled within our environment. So yeah, it's kind of the same. You have the same benefits, but not the same drawbacks.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, we've hit our time. So lovely to talk to you as always. Hopefully we can
Likewise.
catch up again soon.
Sure. Thank you very much.
All right, Ren, thank you. Bye.
Yes. Bye-bye.